Hello, History 363. So we left off after the Battle of Cannae. Two Roman consular armies surrounded, annihilated, over 50,000 Roman and Italian soldiers killed or captured. One consul falls fighting. The other, Terentius Vero, rides back to Rome, where the Senate thanks him for not despairing the Republic. And in the wake of this catastrophe, the defections begin of Italian peoples, many of whom may have been long dissatisfied with Roman hegemony, and some of whom just simply think that Rome's not going to win after this battle has so shattered Roman power. So this includes, again, kind of old enemies like the Samnites, Lucanians, other Oscan peoples in the south, the Brudians. It also includes, and this is the most shocking defection, the Campanians, the Capuans. Capo, remember, is a civitas sine suffragio. They are citizens without the vote, and they have been so since the end of the Latin War in 338. But now they revolt and proclaim their independence and autonomy. And that is a real blow, given that these had been part of Rome's citizen body. And in addition to these Italian defections, foreign powers seem to think that Rome is going to lose too. So Syracuse switches sides, despite having been a loyal ally of Rome since the opening days, since 263. And also Macedonia signs a treaty of peace and friendship with Carthage. And in this treaty, we actually see what, say, had Hannibal won, what his settlement might have looked like. Rome would still exist, although probably much reduced in power and influence, and the southern Italian peoples would have their freedom, although under a kind of Carthaginian, Carthaginian protectorate, probably. So Rome, therefore, looks beaten, but instead of, say, trying to seek a peace treaty, it moves to claw its way back from the brink. And this is going to involve mobilizing manpower and money in truly desperate ways. So first, manpower. It helps the Romans that while they lose a number of their allies, including quite a lot of their southern Italian allies, there are nonetheless many Italian peoples who stay loyal. Sometimes, as in the case of the Etruscans, that loyalty is reinforced by the presence of Roman armies that are there in kind of restive areas. Critically, all of the Latin colonies stay loyal, and that is an important source of both manpower and, of course, these colonies, because of their placement, control strategic locations. Here it helps that the Romans, even with the loss of Capua and other companions, have a still quite large pool of military manpower. There are probably about 300,000 non-Capuan Roman citizens before the Second Punic War. Again, probably 50 to 60,000 of these have been killed, which is devastating losses, but it still remains a big pool of probably 250 or so adult male citizens remaining by, again, some estimates. Now still, in order to produce the military mobilization that the Romans need, they're going to have to scrape the bottom of the barrel. They start probably enlisting men who ordinarily would not serve in the legions. Men, typically men seem to stop serving around 35. It seems probably they're now recruiting people well over the age of both 35 and even 45. They start recruiting boys who, as young as 15 or 16, who usually would be too young to serve in the legion. And then most shockingly of all, they recruit slaves, 2 legions of slave volunteers, Wallones, who are promised that if they fight well, they will receive their freedom. And they are eventually freed after they score some victories in southern Italy. The Romans actually go to having, by 212, 25 legions in the field. And even if these legions are somewhat under strength, this is probably about 80,000 Roman citizens mobilized and perhaps an equal number or slightly more of Italian allies. So the numbers that the Romans can keep mobilized is going to be important in their victory. So they are scraping the barrel manpower-wise. Also, they're going to be quite constrained in terms of money. They levy a double tributum, or they double the rate of tributum after Cannae, as a mechanism just to try to bring in enough money to pay the legions. That actually isn't enough to pay all the legions, and we also know that the Romans are steadily debasing that heavy bronze currency we talked about last lecture. It's getting lighter and lighter until it only weighs, what had previously weighed a Roman pound now only weighs a couple of ounces. And here, necessity is the mother of invention. The Romans take this moment of desperation to completely reform their currency system and actually make it modern in the 3rd century BC sense. Most Greek states have a modern currency system where the silver currency corresponds with the bronze currency. That is, it's very easy to know if you have a certain number of bronze coins, what those would be in a silver coin, the same way that if you have quarters and you know they make $1. The Romans do not have that. They have this huge clunky system of heavy bronze coinage. And occasionally the Romans do either, usually actually it's minted by allies, but the Romans do have some silver coinage every now and then, highly irregular issues of silver coinage. And the silver coins, which are minted on the either as Greek drachmas or Greek didrachmas, there's no correspondence to what those silver coins are worth compared to the bronze coins. And presumably people are just kind of making educated guesses. That's an incredibly clumsy system, particularly when you have a ton of state payments to make. And those state payments may vary from everything from the pay for an individual legionary to, say, these huge amounts of money that might be going to a contractor who's providing the army with food. So the Romans, by 211, and probably we actually first have archaeological evidence in 211. So this new coinage system probably emerges 214, 213-ish. It's called the Denarius system. I've mentioned the Denarius as the unit of Roman coinage when we talked sort of about the Roman Republic in general, but it doesn't emerge until the Second Punic War. So the denarius is a silver coin. It's minted roughly, it weighs roughly as much as a Greek or Attic drachma. The denarius it's a tenor, and that's because one denarius is worth 10 asses. But these asses aren't the big, heavy 1 pound bronze coins of, say, the First Punic War period. They now remain 2 ounce asses minted on the sextantal standard. So 10 asses equals 1 denarius. And that way, if you're paying someone in asses, it's very easy to convert, okay, well, how many denarii would that be? And vice versa. So the coinage system itself is more rational and more flexible, and also, allows you, for example, if you want to pay an army and you don't want to move a huge, tons and tons of bronze, you can move a smaller amount of silver and distribute it to the army like that. So this new system is also, again, a innovation that helps the Romans claw their way back financially. Another innovation, which actually doesn't stick, the denarius sticks. It's going to be the standard Roman coin well into the Roman Empire. Another innovation that is only temporary is the use of debt, public finance, in that the Romans find that they are unable to pay the contractors who are supplying Roman armies abroad, and therefore they come up with a system whereby they will mortgage public land, ager publicus. The public contractors will accept this land, either in some instances they will be able to have it and use it, probably rent it to other people and pay it like a totally nominal fee to the state. And they'll hold on to this public land until the Romans can actually repay the money they owed them for the supplies provided to the army. So on one hand, this could be eventually a way, since the Roman state does control this ager publicus, this could eventually produce a system of public finance, but it doesn't. It's a temporary expedient, and it goes away after the war is over, in part because the Romans start bringing in so much money from across the Mediterranean. But this is one sort of thing to know when we think about mechanisms of state power. From the early modern period onward, public finance, public debt is an indispensable technology of governance and particularly an indispensable technology of war finance. And oddly, the Romans, as much war as they make, don't do it, except for this one little experiment that they then abandon. But still, it's notable that at this moment of crisis, public debt is sort of this expedient that they are at least thinking about as a way of scraping by. Now, in terms of strategy, the basic strategy remains Fabian, the strategy of delay, of not confronting Hannibal. You've been feeding him army after army. He's been just crushing them. Why would you give him another army to destroy? And indeed, a key figure in these years is Fabius Maximus, who is going to be elected consul in 215, elected consul again in 214. His son is going to be elected consul in 213, and many people believe that Fabius basically commands through his son. And then Fabius holds his 5th consulship in 209. There is a norm in the Roman Republic that you don't hold iterative consulships. That norm kind of goes out the window during this crisis, where the Roman voters are willing to elect and re-elect men who have proven that they're competent generals. And so that works to Fabius's benefit. Another general who holds multiple consulships is Claudius Marcellus. Fabius is more conservative, Claudius Marcellus is more aggressive, and in fact, Claudius Marcellus eventually dies in a foolhardy reconnaissance against Hannibal. But a key success that Claudius Marcellus achieves before he dies is with an army he captures Syracuse in 212 BC, a welcome victory that kind of starts to mark the war turning. In 212, so Claudius Marcellus captures Syracuse in 212. Capua falls to a Roman army in 211, and the people of Capua are punished, including the execution of a number of the leading aristocracy who had been instigators of the revolt. The people themselves will not be re-enrolled as Roman citizens until 189 BC. They will kind of have no status and simply be governed by Roman prefects until then. So the Romans, again, aren't confronting Hannibal, but they are trying to pick off the defectors, and so we see that with defectors and armies, Carthaginian armies that aren't controlled by Hannibal, because the Romans pretty quickly figure out Hannibal is this sort of genius, but we can beat other Carthaginian armies. So the Romans, therefore, the strategy of both kind of delay and then confrontation in the periphery works quite well. They capture Syracuse, they capture Capua. Tarentum, which Hannibal has also defects to Hannibal somewhat later, is then in turn recaptured. And for a while, the Romans are doing quite well in Spain. After the Battle of Trebia, the consul of 218, Publius Cornelius Scipio, remember he has a son of the same name, but the consul of 218, who had been wounded at the river Ticinus, had recovered. He becomes a proconsul in Spain, where he joins his brother Gnaeus Scipio, also a proconsul, and they operate 2 armies that for a while actually put reasonable pressure on the Carthaginians in kind of that area north around the Ebro in northern Spain. However, in 212, the Scipio brothers, perhaps kind of knowing, gosh, Claudius Marcellus is around Capua, he's around Syracuse, and he looks like he's going to take it at some point soon, realizing that maybe that victories, Roman generals are getting more aggressive again. The Scipio brothers decide that they're going to get more aggressive. And so they split up their army, bad idea, launched 2 separate attacks in Spain, and they are both killed in battle, and their armies are badly beaten, and both retreat back to the Ebro. The Romans send another general to Spain as a pro-praetor. He doesn't do very well, and so frustrated, they are about to elect yet another commander to Spain, except supposedly no one wants to actually run for this office because it's just kind of this cursed post. Until a new commander steps up, and this commander is young Publius Cornelius Scipio, the son of the consul of 218, who is now dead in Spain, and he so far is not very far along his career. He had again been a military tribune at the Battle of Cannae and had been one of the survivors. He'd run for aedile in 213, and so the highest, really probably the only office he's held is aedile. Note that he skipped the quaestorship, a reminder that the cursus honorum, that course of honors, is still oftentimes quite irregular at this point, particularly probably for men from splendid families like the Cornelii Scipiones. But now he is elected by the Comitia Tributa as an extraordinary commander in Spain, in that he's not a praetor or a consul. He is given proconsular imperium, but he is sine magistrati. He is without a magistrate. He is simply a proconsul who's been given that power despite not having previously held or currently holding an office with imperium. This is another kind of irregular constitutional mechanism that the Romans are using simply because they need another general. Now, one thing to note, Roman democracy, if we want to use that word, is highly deferential. The Romans are like, until recently, people in Massachusetts voting for Kennedy's. They'll elect him, they don't care, they'll elect him no matter what. The Romans are like that with Cornelii Scipiones. So they elect this young man whose only kind of military actions to date are saving his father in a skirmish, okay, that's pretty cool and heroic, and being one of the survivors from Cannae, which he got destroyed along with everyone else, was lucky to break out. There's no reason to think that Cornelius Scipio, at least from his current record, is some kind of military genius. And in fact, here it's quite likely the fact that he is elected, other than he may even run unopposed, is simply because of his family name. And of course, back in Spain in 221, the only reason Hannibal was put in charge of the Carthaginian army in Spain was because of his family name, because he was the son of Hamilcar. I guess in both instances, we sort of have examples of deferential democracy. It pays off, though, because Publius Cornelius Scipio, I'm going to slip up and probably call him Scipio Africanus, the title that he takes after his defeat of the Carthaginians at the Battle of Zama. But he is going to be perhaps one of Rome's greatest generals, period. And that is from the whole period of Roman history, from 509 BC to 476 AD. He is probably one of the most talented Roman generals and a genuine military genius in his own right, except no one knows that yet. Young Scipio goes to Spain. He brings reinforcements and takes over the survivors of his father and his uncle's armies. And he decides that he's going to do a bold move. He's up on the Ebro River. He decides that he's going to launch a quick, rapid strike by both land and sea against the main Carthaginian base at New Carthage, which is a long way from the Ebro. Polybius tells us that he engages in careful an intelligence operation, learning about the city, the walls, the tides, and then he strikes quickly with an army of about 25,000 men, aided by a fleet. The garrison is not particularly strong, but it's surrounded by strong walls. Scipio apparently learns that there are times that the winds, and we're not actually sure, that we're told, he seems to think that the winds cause the water in the lagoon, that is a prominent feature of the city, to become more shallow. It's debated whether that has ever happened, but for whatever reason, he has reason to believe that the water at times is more shallow, and that he's going to use that in his attack to move soldiers who can then bring up ladders and assault parts of the wall that are probably seen as more secure and therefore less strongly manned because they face this lagoon. Polybius tells us that Scipio, because his soldiers are very superstitious, tells them that, hey, look, guys, I've had a dream. And in that dream, the god Neptune, the god of the sea, has come to me and told me that this risky plan that I just laid out to you is going to work. Now, Polybius thinks that Scipio is kind of a rational guy, just taking advantage of the stupid superstition of his soldiers. It's not impossible that Scipio isn't a rational guy, that he's actually kind of a mystical guy and thinks that he talks with various gods. But suffice it to say, he in doing that is kind of portraying himself as a somewhat higher plane than even most Roman magistrates are accustomed to presenting themselves. Suffice to say, his sudden strike catches the Carthaginians by surprise. His maneuver through the lagoon, for whatever circumstance allows his soldiers to move through the water and assault the other side of the wall, is successful. He captures New Carthage, and now in a stroke, he's taken the major Carthaginian base. He's captured a good amount of money. He captures a number of artisans who are enslaved by the Carthaginians, who he now uses to help refit his armies. And this is important. He captures a large number of hostages that the Carthaginians have taken and concentrated at New Carthage. The way the Carthaginians control Spain, in no small part, is they've subdued all these Spanish communities, and they say, okay, we want you to send your children, and we're going to hold them, and that they will be sort of, proof of your good behavior. And therefore, when we say you need to send money or you need to send a contingent of soldiers, the reason you'll do that is that the chieftain or king or important people in that community know that their children are under Carthaginian control in New Carthage. So they can't really say no. Now Scipio has all of those children. And pointedly, he treats them really well, making sure that they're safe, making sure that they are not sexually abused by his soldiers, because he realizes the diplomatic importance. These are actually the nodes of Iberian society. They tie into the networks of Iberian society that Scipio can use to convince various groups to switch sides. So it's a diplomatic coup in addition to being a military coup. And Scipio, now operating out of New Carthage, subsequently trains his army, toughens up his army, and prepares them to engage the Carthaginian armies in a set-piece battle. At the Battle of Baikula in 208 BC, he defeats Hannibal's brother. Hannibal's brother is named Hasdrubal Barca, yet another Hasdrubal. And he defeats him in the first of a kind of series of really kind of clever, intricate maneuvers. That is, the Carthaginians are in a camp that is up on a ridge. Scipio draws up below the camp, and he does this waiting until the Carthaginians seem to think that he's not going to offer battle. And then suddenly he sends two wings simultaneously up either side of the ridge where the Carthaginian camp is. These two flying pincers catch the Carthaginians by surprise. Scipio's center simultaneously sweeps up the ridge, and basically we have the kind of envelopment that Scipio had been on the receiving end of at Cannae. The Carthaginians abandon their camp with significant losses, and Hasdrubal Barca himself decides that he's going to abandon Spain. He decides to start moving his army out from Spain and to go to Italy to rejoin Hannibal. Hasdrubal Barca's movement creates a potential crisis. Hannibal has been quite weak after Cannae. He's lost his main source of recruits, the Gauls, now that he's operating in southern Italy. And as his army just sort of shrinks through attrition, he's had less capacity for maneuver and initiative. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not dangerous. He briefly appears outside of the walls of Rome as the Romans are besieging Capua, and causes a bit of a stir, although he doesn't seem to have the capacity to truly besiege Rome and its 7 miles of circuit walls. And he also, on a few occasions when Roman armies dare to confront him, continues to inflict some sharp defeats. So he's not harmless, but his army is probably shrinking, and with the shrinking size of his army, his initiative is shrinking. If another Carthaginian army comprised of high-quality African and Iberian troops can come down through the Alps, pick up some more Gauls, and join Hannibal, he will become very, very dangerous again. So when the Romans find out that Hasdrubal Barca is moving up through the Alps again, they are quite alarmed. And essentially what they do is they don't want Hannibal to know that they know. And so they send one army to confront Hasdrubal once he's made it into northern Italy and Umbria. And then another consul, pretending that his force is still there as one of the several armies that are always kind of around Hannibal containing him, he peels away at the last minute with probably one legion and one wing, darts north to join the other consul. The two consuls confront Hasdrubal Barca at the Metaurus River. And they fight in somewhat rugged country. Indeed, part of the battle involves one consul who's attacking, realizing that the terrain's too rough to make a successful attack, redeploying actually behind the other army to attack on the left, and this is more successful. It seems to basically there'll be a bloody, brutal battle in which the Carthaginians suffer heavy losses, and critically, Hasdrubal Barca is killed. And supposedly Hannibal learns about the death of his brother and the defeat of his brother when the Romans catapult the head into his camp. So this is the Battle of the Metaurus River in 207 BC. And in some ways, that's a kind of another turning point in the war. That while the Roman fortunes have already been looking up with the capture of Syracuse, with the capture of Capua, with the capture of New Carthage in 209 BC, the Battle of the Metaurus River probably represents the last time that the Carthaginians may have the initiative. And so from now on, the initiative is on the sides of the Romans, and indeed on the side of young Cornelius Scipio, who's still on the offensive in Spain. So I think the Second Punic War is a sufficiently important war that it's probably worth one more video. We're again a little off where the syllabus is, but that's okay. Again, this is a moment that I think illustrates a lot about the Roman state, its organization, its capacity, and its first movement into the Western Mediterranean. So I feel comfortable spending a little more time on it than we planned. The readings will just keep on the same track for the readings. I think that's fine, but we'll do a little more on the Second Punic War. We'll wrap up the Second Punic War next time. So I'll see you then.